Chapter 1. The Contract and the Rejection. The Devereaux estate did not smell of home. It smelled of polished beeswax, fountain spray, and money so old it no longer needed to shout. Jamie Park stood under the great chandelier in a slate-blue suit his aunt had hemmed by hand, each stitch a whispered hope for a better future. He clasped his hands in front of him, steady in posture even though his pulse thundered in his throat. He had always been good at this, keeping his head, focusing on goals. Graduate fellowship applications, research assistantship interviews, tutoring to cover tuition. He'd been told an arranged bond would secure his future, give him breathing room to finish school. Across the marble colonnade, Ethan Devereaux prowled in a dove-gray three-piece suit like a man inspecting a car he already suspected of being a lemon. He was handsome in a cut-glass way. Razored cheekbones, citrus and steel scent sharp enough to sting, but his eyes carried the restless glint of someone who needed to belittle to feel tall. "Too soft," he murmured, loud enough for the family lawyer and the photographers disguised as family dinner guests to hear. "I need an heir, not a decoration." Jamie blinked, pulse stuttering. He felt the sentence land on his skin like a slap. He had known Ethan only a week. Short meetings, formal dinners, but no one had warned him the rejection would be public theater. Ethan's fingers closed on the vellum contract, embossed crests gleaming, and ripped it down the middle. A flare of camera shutters burst like fireworks. Jamie's throat went tight. All the lectures he had aced, all the late nights balancing his scholarship budget, and none of it mattered to men like Ethan. He was a pedigree in their eyes, and now a failed one. He felt the ground tilt. "I won't be signing," Ethan announced. "Our family will find a proper omega." The room's silence was softer than pity. Someone whispered. Someone's phone clicked a new alert. Jamie's vision blurred. He turned before they could see him break. The autumn garden swallowed him whole. The sky had been a jeweled blue when he arrived. Now a sudden downpour sheeted off the glass roofs, slicking the bluestone paths. Water flattened his black hair to his forehead, stung his eyes. He walked faster, then slower, until his breath hitched. He had done everything right. He'd agreed to a contract because his scholarship didn't cover next semester's housing. He'd prepared himself for clinical obligation, for bearing an heir like an equation to be solved. And still, too soft. He pressed a trembling hand to a marble balustrade. Beyond it, the fountain sprayed silver arcs into the darkening air. His reflection was a smudge, eyes too wide, mouth pressed shut. Rain soaked his suit to his skin. The air smelled of wet stone and cut roses, and underneath, of humiliation. A shadow stretched across his shoes. "You shouldn't have been put through that." Jamie blinked up. An umbrella tilted over him, black cloth catching rain like a shield. The man holding it had the same Devereaux bone structure but gentler eyes, gray with a storm's depth instead of a blade's edge. Drew Devereaux, the older brother. His tie hung loosened, his black suit jacket already off. Without asking, he draped it over Jamie's shoulders. Warmth and cedar smoke scent wrapped him like a heartbeat. Jamie stiffened, then sagged. He'd seen Drew once before at a family dinner, silent, half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. He hadn't imagined this. The umbrella, the low voice like warm gravel, the way he positioned himself slightly between Jamie and the estate windows, blocking any stray camera angles. "Come on," Drew said quietly. "There's a conservatory just ahead, out of the rain." Jamie swallowed hard. "Why are you?" "Because someone should," Drew said. "That's reason enough." The conservatory's glass roof rattled with rain. Inside, orchids climbed their stakes and hibiscus flared crimson against the green. Drew set the umbrella aside and moved with unhurried precision, plugged in a kettle, fetched a towel from a bench, held it out but didn't reach to dab Jamie himself. "Here." Jamie took the towel. His fingers brushed Drew's for a heartbeat, calloused pads from real work, not just boardrooms. He pressed the towel to his hair, shaking. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he muttered. "I should have." "You should have nothing," Drew said. He loosened his cuffs, rolled them up, poured steaming water over a sachet of herbal tea. "I've opposed these contracts from the start. My parents call it tradition. I call it coercion." Jamie accepted the teacup, hands trembling. Drew steadied the saucer from below, but let Jamie keep the weight of it. The tea smelled of chamomile and pear. "I thought," Jamie stopped. "Everyone said this was my one chance. If I just was compliant enough." Drew's mouth tightened. Compliance is not the same as consent. Jamie looked at him over the rim of the cup. Drew's eyes were steady but soft, the way one might look at a bird with a bent wing. Rain ticked overhead. The kettle clicked off. He felt warmth seep into his palms, into the hollow place humiliation had carved in his chest. You didn't claim anyone, Jamie said, a little defiant. Why? Because a bond is a vow you repeat every day, not something notarized once. Drew leaned against a table of potted ferns. I'm not interested in an Omega who's cornered into saying yes. I'd rather be alone than be a captor. Jamie's hands trembled harder. He set the cup down before he spilled it. No one in the Devereaux family had ever said anything like that in his hearing. Rain blurred the view beyond the glass. Jamie's reflection was ghost pale in it, Drew's a darker anchor beside him. Thank you, Jamie said quietly. For tea? For not. He gestured vaguely toward the house. That. Drew's mouth quirked, half smile, half grief. You deserve better than that. The rain thinned to a mist. Drew glanced toward the door. If you want, I can escort you back to campus through the side gate. Fewer cameras. Jamie hesitated. The jacket still hung warm around his shoulders. The tea still glowed in his belly. Outside, the main drive would be a gauntlet of gossip and lenses. Yes, he said. Please. Drew retrieved the umbrella, held it open, but didn't touch Jamie's arm. Together they walked a gravel path lined with wet hydrangeas. The world smelled of rain and cedar, and something else. Possibility, maybe. At the car door, Drew unlocked it and stepped back, giving Jamie space. Headlights gleamed off the slick driveway, making the umbrella's circle of darkness feel small but fierce. Jamie glanced up at him. Drew's tie was loosened, his hair damp at the temples, his posture somehow both powerful and careful. He had stepped between Jamie and the world without smothering him. Thank you, Jamie murmured again, voice steadier now. Drew inclined his head, a slight bow of courtesy that felt like respect. Any time. Jamie slid into the car. As the door closed, he looked through the rain-slick window. Drew stood with the umbrella tilted like a shield, jacketless in the mist, a dark figure ringed by light. For a heartbeat, Jamie felt something loosen in his chest, an echo of safety he'd almost forgotten existed. The car pulled away. The umbrella grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it was only a dot of black under the estate's marble glare, holding back the storm. Chapter 2. The Brothers' Umbrella. Rain still freckled the windows of Drew's sedan when Jamie slid into the passenger seat. The leather smelled faintly of cedar, echoing Drew's scent, and something else, warm wool, a hint of bergamot from the tea they'd shared. The door closed with a quiet click. For a moment, neither spoke. The windshield wipers swept arcs of sound, steady as a heartbeat. Jamie clasped his damp hands on his knees, watching droplets slip down the glass. He was still wearing Drew's jacket. It dwarfed him, but the weight felt steadying rather than engulfing. Seatbelt, Drew murmured. His tone was easy, not commanding. Jamie clicked it into place. They rolled out of the estate's side gate, gravel crunching under tires. Through the window, the marble colonnade blurred behind a gauze of rain. You didn't have to walk me out, Jamie said quietly. I wanted to. Drew's hands were loose on the wheel, long fingers calloused at the pads. No one should be left standing in the rain after that. Jamie let out a sound between a laugh and a scoff. You talk like it wasn't orchestrated. It was, Drew said, eyes on the road. But you didn't sign up to be humiliated. You signed up because you thought it would buy you time for school. You deserved better. Jamie studied his profile in the dim dashboard light. Same Devereaux bone structure as Ethan, but softened. Eyes like smoke, not steel. His tie hung askew, his shirt collar open at the throat. He looked less like a dynasty heir and more like a man trying to get them both through the storm. You keep saying deserve, Jamie said finally. Most alphas I've met talk about duty. Duty's empty without consent, Drew said. A flicker of rueful humor crossed his mouth. A bond is a vow repeated daily, not notarized once. Jamie's breath caught. The phrase settled in him like warmth under cold skin. I've always been told I'm delicate. He admitted. Like I should be grateful if anyone picks me. He stared at his hands. I'm tired of apologizing for softness. Drew's glance slid from the road to him, then back. Softness isn't a flaw. It's how you keep others from turning to stone. His knuckles brushed the steering wheel. Don't let anyone shame you for that. Jamie blinked hard, throat tight. No one had ever said it like that. The car hummed through city lights, the wet pavement reflecting neon in streaks of red and gold. When they reached the university gates, their glow shimmered like a mirage in the mist. Drew eased the car to the curb. The dorm's entryway light buzzed overhead as they stepped out. Drew walked him up the stone steps, but stopped just shy of the door. Jamie's keycard trembled between his fingers. "Thank you for the ride," Jamie said. "You're welcome." Drew's gaze swept the dim hallway beyond. Through the cracked door, Jamie saw his own room. Scent blockers lined up like little soldiers on the desk, a stack of econometrics problem sets slumped under a highlighter. "You've eaten?" Drew asked. "Yeah," Jamie lied. His stomach chose that moment to growl, low and mortifying. A surprised laugh broke from Drew, warm and unmean. Jamie covered his face. Then he laughed too, a shaky thing that still felt good. "I'll survive," Jamie muttered. "I'm sure you will." Drew's eyes glinted. "But you don't have to on an empty stomach." He didn't push further, only nodded toward the hallway. "Get dry. Sleep." Jamie hesitated. He wanted to say something. Anything. But the words tangled. Drew was still outside the threshold, one hand braced against the jamb, not crossing. Respectful tension pulsed between them like a held note. "Good night," Jamie managed. "Good night, Jamie." Drew inclined his head, then turned back down the stairs, his shoulders a broad shadow against the rain-damp glow. Jamie closed the door and leaned against it, heart fluttering like the wings of the moths around the hallway light. His phone buzzed as he toweled his hair. A photo appeared. The black umbrella propped open by a stone fireplace, droplets still clinging to its ribs. Caption, "I owe you a warm meal." Jamie stared at it, a slow smile sneaking over his mouth. He snapped a blurry selfie in the library nook. Thumbs up, textbook half visible, and sent it back, studying first. Rain check. 3 dots pulsed. Then, hold you to it. Another buzz. Eat something real tonight. Jamie shook his head, laughing under his breath. A magnetic undertow hummed in their banter. Across campus, Drew slipped his phone back into his pocket, a faint smile curling the corner of his mouth. 2 days later, Drew's invitation arrived as a text. Public Botanical Garden, after-hours fundraiser. No press. Interested? Jamie hesitated, biting his lip. He had been living on caffeine and coursework, avoiding gossip. But the image of the umbrella by the fireplace kept floating back to him. He typed, "Yes." The evening was cool and misted when he arrived. The garden gates were closed to the public, but Drew waited just inside, hands in his coat pockets. Small strings of lights wound up palm trunks, casting gold halos in the damp air. "You came," he said, voice low. "You invited me." Jamie hugged his coat closer. "What's the occasion?" "Charity for local greenhouses." Drew smiled faintly. "And privacy." They walked beneath archways of climbing jasmine. The scent rose sweet under the night rain. Inside the orchid house, glass panes beaded with moisture, mist drifting like breath. Drew kept a gentleman's 2 steps of space as they strolled, pointing out rare blossoms with an ease that surprised Jamie. "That one's a ghost orchid. Only blooms when it wants to." Jamie glanced at him. "You know a lot about this." "I used to hide here during events," Drew admitted. "Plants don't posture." Jamie's mouth quirked. He slowed, then deliberately closed the space between them, shoulder-brushing his sleeve. "Which greenhouse is your favorite?" Drew's breath caught almost imperceptibly. "The one with the night-blooming Sirius. Only opens for a few hours." "Show me," Jamie said. They moved together down a narrow path. Their hands swung close enough for knuckles to graze, but didn't. The warmth between them felt like a pulse under the damp air. On the way back toward the exit, Jamie's heel slid on the wet stone. He lurched. Drew's hand caught his elbow, firm but not gripping. "You okay?" Drew asked. Jamie swayed closer, balance regained. Their faces were inches apart. His heart hammered. "Thank you," he breathed. Drew's eyes held his. "Anytime you want me close, ask." Heat shot up Jamie's spine, a spark of something he hadn't dared hope for. He stepped back just enough, but the echo of Drew's words stayed. They resumed walking, slower now, silence full but not awkward. Outside the gates, the city lights glowed damply. When Jamie got back to his dorm, he texted Nora, fingers trembling. "He's different." He lay back on his bed, phone still in his hand, Drew's scent clinging faintly to his coat. For the first time in weeks, the storm in his chest felt a little less cold. Chapter 3. First Real Touch. Jamie's dorm room glowed soft under the lamplight. The overhead bulb left off in favor of a desk lamp angled toward his books. Post-its mapped his wall in constellations of formulas and half-written reminders, their colors blurred where the humidifier had left a fine mist. Outside the window, the campus streetlight threw pale circles onto wet pavement. His phone buzzed on the desk. Another text from Drew. Hydrate. A second buzz. Eat. Jamie exhaled a laugh through his nose. He swiped open a photo. A paper bag beaded with rain on his doorstep. No pressure to open, just nourishment. He padded barefoot to the door and opened it. The corridor was empty but for the bag. Inside, a container of soup still warm and a note in quick, square handwriting. Proud of you for existing. Jamie stood there a moment, the paper warm in his hands, throat tight. He set the soup on his desk and stared at it as if it might vanish. No one had ever texted him to drink water before. He ate, slowly, until the tremor in his hands eased. An hour later came another knock. Jamie blinked, wiping his mouth. He opened the door to find Drew leaning against the jamb, casual in a dark sweater, an envelope-style notebook in hand. You left this in the car, Drew said. Jamie squinted at it. I don't think I did. You did now. Drew's smile was a small curve. Jamie laughed softly, then winced. The air around him had thickened all evening, edges of scent slipping past his blockers. His fingers clenched on the doorframe. Stress, humiliation, and the memory of Drew's steady hands were tipping him into an early heat cycle. His skin felt too tight. He looked up at Drew, eyes glazed. Can you? He swallowed. Stay? Just help. No mating. Please. Drew's posture straightened. Alert but not predatory. Of course. Jamie stepped back to let him in. Drew set the notebook on the desk and moved with deliberate calm, scanning the room. He cracked the window an inch to let in cool night air. He dimmed the lamp to a low amber. Where are your cool cloths? Drawer, Jamie murmured, sinking onto the edge of his bed, knees drawn up. Drew found them, soaked two in water from the sink, and wrung them out. Neck or wrists first? Jamie blinked at him, surprised by the question. Wrists. Drew knelt to Jamie's level, holding one cloth out but not touching. May I? Yes. He wrapped the damp fabric around Jamie's wrist, the chill making Jamie shiver. He repeated the process on the other side, pausing each time for a nod. The cedar smoke scent of Drew's skin drifted close but not overwhelming. Jamie's breathing hitched. Blocker, he whispered. Drew retrieved the small vial from the desk and held it up. Here? Jamie extended his arm. Yeah. Cool liquid dotted his pulse. Drew's thumb smoothed it in with clinical care, eyes flicking up to check his expression. The room thickened with a different charge, not compulsion but awareness. Jamie straddled a pillow on the mattress, rocking slightly, biting his lip. Drew stayed kneeling on the floor, steady as a lighthouse. Jamie's voice came out shaking. Kiss me? Drew's hands flexed on his thighs. Are you sure? Jamie nodded, pupils wide. Please. Drew rose slowly, giving him time to pull back. He didn't. Drew bent and brushed his mouth to Jamie's, just a touch, dry and warm. Jamie's hands lifted to the front of Drew's sweater, clutching. The kiss deepened but stayed slow, mouths exploring rather than devouring. Their clothes stayed on, rumpled but intact, hands visible, palms sliding up shoulders, not under fabric. Jamie made a soft sound, half relief, half hunger. Drew's thumb stroked his jaw once, then fell still, letting Jamie lead. The heat in Jamie's body thinned from sharp to soft, like a fever breaking under cool rain. They kissed until Jamie's trembling eased. When Drew drew back, his forehead rested against Jamie's, breath steady. Better? He murmured. Jamie nodded, eyes fluttering closed. Later, the two of them climbed the narrow stairwell to the dorm's rooftop. Night wind cooled flushed cheeks, carrying the scent of wet leaves. The city sprawled below in pinpricks of light. Jamie leaned into Drew's shoulder without thinking. Drew wrapped his jacket around him like a blanket, but kept one hand on the railing, the other open on his thigh, an offer, not a claim. They stood like that for a long time, the only sound the hiss of traffic far below. You didn't have to, Jamie said quietly. I wanted to, Drew replied. Jamie let his head rest a little heavier against him. The warmth of Drew's body, the cool of the wind, the steadiness of his scent. He felt anchored for the first time in weeks. Morning sunlight spilled through the half-open blinds. Jamie stirred at the sound of clattering in the kitchenette. He blinked and sat up. Drew stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, hair mussed, flipping eggs with the absent ease of someone at home. Jamie's mouth curved before he could stop it. He padded over, still in his t-shirt and shorts, and leaned against the doorframe. You cook? When necessary. Drew slid eggs onto a plate. You've got class in an hour. Eat first. Jamie accepted the plate. Their shoulders brushed. Drew bent and pressed a kiss to his forehead, light, not claiming, just there. At the door, Drew paused, looking back once. Text me if you need anything. Jamie nodded, speechless. When the door closed, he drifted to the bathroom mirror. His lips were swollen from kisses, not bites. No marks, but the kind he wanted. He touched his mouth and, for the first time in weeks, saw himself smiling back. Chapter 4. The Twins and the Storm. The lecture hall's old radiators hissed like tired snakes. On the projector behind Jamie, his slides flicked from a scatterplot to a model specification, bullet points lining up in obedient rows. He had rehearsed this presentation in front of his mirror until the language felt like a familiar song. Heteroskedasticity, endogeneity, instrumental variables, the rhythm of things he could control. And if we instrument housing shocks with... His mouth lost the next word. A thin band of silver brightened at the edges of his vision. He tightened his grip on the lectern and smiled too hard. The room swam a fraction left. In the front row, Nora lifted her chin from her palm. Jamie, she said softly. I'm fine, Jamie said, and was shocked to hear that he sounded almost convincing. He clicked the remote, felt the room drift another inch away, and suddenly the remoteness wasn't bearable at all. Heat prickled at the base of his skull, an echo of the cycle that had nipped at his heels for days. He had slept badly the night before, body too aware of itself, of scent and memory and wanting. He took a breath. The slide on the screen blurred, bullet points dissolving like sugar. The floor tilted. Nora was already moving when his knees went loose. She caught his elbow as his shoulder clipped the cheap wood panel of the lectern. The crash he dreaded didn't come. The room's murmur surged, then flattened under the professor's quick, "All right, that's enough for today. Email me the slides, Mr. Park." Nora murmured, "I've got you, honey," and half walked, half carried him out. In the hallway, the air was cooler, the light less cruel. The world narrowed to the press of her palm and the flutter of his breath. "Clinic," she said, and he didn't argue. The campus clinic smelled like eucalyptus and printer ink. Jamie lay back on the papered exam bed and stared at the ceiling tile with the crooked vent he'd noticed last year during flu season. Dr. Ren Ito, soft-voiced, neat-handed, the kind of Omega Care specialist every student whispered grateful stories about, took blood, checked vitals, clicked something into the EMR. "You've been under significant stress," Dr. Ren said, not as a question. "Heat cycling earlier than usual." Jamie nodded, cheeks hot. It was manageable. His throat worked. "I had help." "A partner?" Dr. Ren's tone could have folded a napkin. No judgment, just notes. "Someone I trust." "Good." Dr. Ren's eyes warmed. "We'll run a panel. Basic endocrine, check for dehydration. There's a rapid urine test we can do as well. You fainted, so we're going to be thorough and boring. How are you with boring, Jamie?" "I teach it," Jamie said, and Dr. Ren smiled. Nora squeezed his hand and then, at his nod, stepped out to field a rain of texts. The clinic hummed around him. A printer waking, a door sighing shut, the low burr of voices. Jamie watched the vent and counted his breaths. The test results pinged the EMR first, a cheerful chirp that felt obscene in the quiet. Dr. Ren's expression shifted, then softened profoundly. He turned the monitor so Jamie could see. "Omega pregnant," Dr. Ren said gently. "HCG is high." Jamie's brain did a slow, foolish somersault. The three letters didn't lodge. The word did. Pregnant. It went through him in a wave that knocked loose several other words he'd been using to define himself lately. Rejected. Too soft, almost. A tide wiping the slate clean. "There's more," Dr. Ren murmured, pointing to a secondary marker. "Twin indicators." Jamie let out a breath that wasn't a laugh, but wasn't not either. It sounded like the last hinge of an old door giving way. "Twins," he repeated. Dr. Ren's eyes were kind. "I know that's a lot. Sit with it a second. We'll confirm with an ultrasound in a week, but the markers are persuasive. How do you feel?" Jamie closed his eyes. He felt like a house at night when the power flickers and returns, rooms full of clocks blinking 12. Behind his eyelids, the last few weeks unspooled and rewove, threads finding their right weave at last, heat cresting like a tide along his spine. Drew's careful hands, the cool cloths, the way he'd asked every time. the rooftop air that had steadied his pulse. The way Jamie had dozed in the circle of Drew's jacket and woken again in the thin blue hour before dawn with want humming low and tender inside him. Not a knife, but a door opening. He had turned toward Drew in that washed-out light. "I want more," he'd said, words quiet and sure as beads slipping onto a string. Drew had propped himself up on one elbow, hair ridiculous, eyes slow with sleep and care. "Tell me," he'd said. "All of it." So Jamie had, and Drew had followed like a tide follows the moon, an ask, a wait, a receive, the ritual they had made between them. He remembered Drew's hand covering his, steadying it, remembered the way their mouths had met and parted, a language that stayed on faces and breath. He remembered the gentleness that was not absence of heat but a way to carry it. He remembered not shame but surprise at how right it felt, the first intimacy of his adult life that gave something back instead of taking. Now in the clinic, his eyes filled. The tears slid warm into his hairline. Not shame, he managed, because Dr. Wren had tipped a tissue into his still hand. "It's just," he laughed, helpless. "No one told me the first real time could bring life, not punishment." Dr. Wren's posture softened even more. "Then I'm glad you were the one to tell you." Jamie wiped his face and laughed again, wetter. "Twins. We'll talk about nutrition, rest, how to pace your semester," Dr. Wren said, all business again, which calmed him further. "We'll keep you with familiar care. If your partner is involved and you want him involved, bring him to the next appointment. There's a lot to decide, but not tonight. Tonight you drink water and you breathe." Jamie nodded. Breathing felt possible. His hands had stopped shaking. He texted Nora, "Okay, we'll explain," then typed another name and sat with it, thumb hovering over the screen. Heart a bird. He pressed send. "Can I come over?" Drew's reply was fast. "Always. Do you need a ride?" "No, I want to walk. I'll leave the door unlocked. Take your time." Drew's building stood clean and quiet, rain pearls on its stone steps. The lobby's night concierge looked up, recognized Jamie from a previous evening's polite introductions, and waved him through with a smile. The elevator sang low. In the hallway, Jamie's shoes squeaked once on polished wood. He found the door already ajar, exactly as promised. Inside, Drew's apartment greeted him with warm light and the odd serenity of curated things chosen because someone loved them. High windows looked over the city, their panes streaked with rain. A scatter of sea glass in a shallow bowl on the console glowed faintly blue-green. A piano took up the far corner, as if it had grown there. Drew stood from the sofa the second Jamie stepped in. "Hey," he said, voice level but not casual. He crossed the room quickly and then stopped with that small checked motion Jamie had already come to recognize, never assuming, always leaving space. Jamie's throat closed, he said. The word made a tiny tremor in the air between them. Drew went very still, then slowly, the breath he'd been holding slipped out of him like a prayer coming true. "Twins," he echoed, and his face changed, like dawn running up a cliff. He didn't lunge or whoop. He simply went to one knee so they were eye level and reached for Jamie's hand. "You and the babies are mine, if you want." The last three words landed like a blessing. "If you want." The cord back to the clinic broke and rewove to this room, to this man. Jamie nodded, dizzy with relief. Drew turned Jamie's hand palm up and pressed his mouth to the center of it, a reverent warmth. Then he leaned forward, hesitating again at the hem of Jamie's sweater, and looked for permission. Jamie lifted the fabric. "Please." Drew bent and kissed his still flat belly like it was a page of scripture. Jamie's hand slid into his hair. Tears burned his eyes again, but this time they didn't blister. When Drew rose, he gathered Jamie in, slow and certain. The cedar smoke of him steadied everything that had been rattling in Jamie since the lecture hall. "Sit," Drew said softly. "Drink this first." A glass of water materialized. Jamie drank, laughing when he dribbled a little. Drew thumbed the drop from his lip with a care that felt like a declaration. "I told Dr. Wren I had help," Jamie murmured. "Good," Drew said. "We'll make sure you have more." Jamie breathed, the first real breath since the clinic. The room's edges softened. His heart was too big for his chest. "Will you?" He glanced at the piano, at the long gleaming line of its back. "Come here?" Drew's mouth curved. "Anywhere you want." They stood with the piano between them, glossy black catching the lamplight in long strokes. Jamie's fingers ghosted the keys, pressing only air. Behind him, Drew's steps were steady. He came close enough that Jamie could feel his heat along his back, then stopped. The space Drew left for him felt like an outline Jamie was invited to fill. "I want to be touched," Jamie said. "I want to be slow." "Okay," Drew said. He would have said it if Jamie had named any pace. "Ask me," Jamie said, because the ritual had become not a rule but a hymn. "May I put my hands on your hips?" "Yes." Warm palms settled on him, broad and careful. He exhaled. "May I kiss your neck?" Jamie nodded, then remembered. "Yes." Drew's mouth found the place below his ear and left heat there, a single certain press. Jamie closed his eyes. The keys under his fingers were cool through the air. The man behind him was warmth and gravity. "May I touch under your sweater?" Jamie's breath hitched. His yes came out on it. Drew's hands slipped under the knit, climbing the map of his ribs, stopping when Jamie did. He stood there, almost holding, but not the kind that trapped, more the kind that marked a place as safe. "Okay?" Drew asked, even though Jamie's body had already tilted back into his. Jamie swallowed. "Okay." They turned, and the piano's flank kissed Jamie's hip as Drew's mouth found his. The kiss was slow, mouths learning each other again like they'd promised to, not hurrying the lesson. Jamie fisted his hands in the back of Drew's sweater and pulled him closer with a small sound that lit something behind Drew's ribs. The heat inside Jamie rose like a tide without violence. When he trembled, Drew steadied him with a palm at the small of his back. When his breath stuttered, Drew eased. When Jamie's hand curved over Drew's wrist, now more, Drew followed until the tremble shifted to a long, low hum. They stayed clothed, rumpled like morning beds. Their foreheads touched, noses brushed. Consent threaded their breaths. Ask, wait, receive. When Jamie gasped and stilled, Drew stilled first and waited for the nod. When the nod came, it was small and sure, and the next kiss had the taste of gratitude in it. The world contracted to that small circle of space. Lamplight, cedar, the faint echo of strings inside the piano answering their bodies' soft collisions. Jamie's back pressed to the instrument. Drew's hands mapped a path that left everything intact, and everything changed. By the end, the heat in Jamie had thinned to something wide and tender, like rain after a long dry month. He rested his forehead to Drew's. Their breaths synced without trying. "Better?" Drew murmured against his mouth, the same question he'd asked in a dorm room days ago. "Better," Jamie said, and smiled. "Best." They stood until the lamp's bulb hummed warmer. Drew laughed under his breath at nothing. Jamie leaned back to see his face and watched the way happiness changed his mouth. He wanted to memorize it as if it were a theorem he could cite later. "Hungry?" Drew asked after a while. "Constantly," Jamie admitted. "Apparently that's our lives now." Drew's eyes flicked down to his abdomen and back with a look Jamie almost couldn't bear. Astonishment braided with a protectiveness that had no edge of ownership in it. "Ours," Drew repeated softly. "If you want." "If I want," Jamie said, and the words felt like home. They didn't make it to the kitchen for 20 minutes. When they did, James found the fruit bowl, and Drew found bread in a pan, and together they made a snack that tasted criminally good. Toast buttered golden, strawberries sliced, a drizzle of honey like sunlight. Ruthless nourishment, Drew called it, and Jamie laughed until he had to lean against him to breathe. The intercom crackled. Both of them stilled. Drew lifted his head, a small tilting like a stag scenting something downwind. The sound came again, followed by the lobby concierge's voice, unusually tight. "Mr. Devereaux, your family is here." Jamie set his plate down too fast. It clattered. He felt the crisp edges of the clinic again, the decisive cough of printers, the clarity of numbers, empty out into a thin, bright panic. Drew put one hand over Jamie's on the counter and squeezed once. Calm flowed from the touch like heat from a stove. "We'll handle it," he said. "Only if you want to." "Do we have a choice?" Jamie asked, and his voice sounded small to his own ears. "We always have a choice," Drew said. He brushed a crumb from Jamie's lip with his thumb and went to buzz open the lobby door. They didn't wait long. The elevator whispered. Then the hallway filled with expensive anger. Ethan arrived first, as if theatrics could win a war before it began. His suit was perfect. His expression wasn't. Behind him, their parents. Vivienne's mouth carved with discreet displeasure. Laurent's hand already resting on the arm of a man who carried a leather folio like a weapon. "Finally useful," Ethan said by way of greeting, eyes shearing past Drew to fix on Jamie. "Our heirs." Jamie's spine snapped straight. His hand went to his belly without thinking, a protective curve. The gesture surprised him and steadied him at once. He felt Drew step forward, not to engulf him, but to draw a clean line in the air between Jamie and the people who thought paper could turn a person back into a thing. "They are not a line," Drew said, voice basalt. "They are people." "Don't be naive," Laurent said, and the disdain sat in the words like a pearl in the mouth of an oyster, grown through years of the same small friction. "You can be as sentimental as you like privately, but publicly." "Publicly," Vivian cut in. "We will need to manage this. Mr. Arden," she indicated the lawyer with a manicure, "has prepared an arrangement. Jamie will come to the family estate for the duration for appropriate medical oversight, and there will be a statement issued immediately. We'll handle the narrative." Jamie found his voice in a place he hadn't known existed. "I have a doctor," he said, surprised at how even it came out. "Dr. Wren, I have classes. I have a life that doesn't fit in a statement." Ethan's laugh was navel and thin. "You think you get to decide? You." "Enough," Drew said, soft and lethal. He shifted, just enough to put his shoulder into Ethan's line of sight. "Jamie decides. The baby's care follows his doctor, not a PR team's calendar." The lawyer opened his folio. Papers shone like teeth. "There are precedents." "There are," Drew said, and the way he said it made the lawyer's mouth click shut. "There are also laws. And there is the fact that your client publicly humiliated the Omega you now wish to fold into a press release. I don't think a court will be kind to that sequence." Color rose in Ethan's cheeks. "You stole what was meant for me." "You threw him away," Drew said, and the truth of it hung in the hallway like a bell's afterring. Ethan flinched as if something in him recognized the tone. "This is done. You can either choose to be decent going forward or not. Either way, Jamie isn't moving anywhere he doesn't choose to go." Vivian's gaze slashed to Jamie, measuring, maybe for the first time seeing a person instead of a placeholder. "We can make this very easy for you," she said. "Everything you want for your education, your future." "You can make it easy for yourselves," Jamie said, polite as a professor. "I'll finish my semester, I'll stay with my doctor, and you will not announce anything without my consent. If you feel compelled to speak, your statement can be, 'No comment on private health matters.'" The silence that followed was a strange new creature. Not just stunned, but forced to respect a boundary that had suddenly materialized where they thought there was only territory. Drew's hand found Jamie's for a heartbeat and squeezed. He didn't interlace their fingers. He didn't need to. The pressure said, "I see you. I agree." The lawyer cleared his throat, certain kinds of calculations brightening his eyes. Laurent smoothed his tie as if rearranging a world that would no longer arrange for him. Vivian exhaled through her nose. "This is not over," she said, which, translated from Devereaux, meant had been fun. "This is the first time we haven't gotten our way." "No," Drew agreed. "It isn't. It's beginning." They left with the crisp efficiency of people who would attempt a new angle before the elevator reached the lobby. The door closed behind them with a hush that felt like respite. The whir of the elevator faded. The apartment listened to their breaths. Jamie sagged against the wall only after Drew had locked the door. He laughed once, a breathless crack, then pressed his hands to his face. "You were perfect," Drew murmured. He didn't touch. He waited. Jamie dropped his hands and leaned forward on his own, pressing his forehead to Drew's sternum, inhaling cedar and steadiness. "Dr. Wren will be so proud," Jamie said into his sweater, and felt Drew's chuckle more than heard it. They stood there, listening to the city's distant tires move water around. The inside of the world felt bigger. It didn't stay small for long. An hour later, after Jamie had eaten another slice of toast and another handful of strawberries, after he had texted Nora a quick safe, "We'll call in the morning," after Drew had found a blanket and wrapped it around Jamie's shoulders as if the apartment were a very gentle campsite, their phones began to vibrate in odd harmony. A friend, then another, then an unknown number. Jamie's stomach went cold even before he saw the image that had been forwarded 5 times by different hands. A corridor, polished floor reflecting blurred figures. In the center, caught in motion, Jamie with his hand curved over his belly, and Drew's body angled in that unmistakable protective way that still left space around him. The caption grafted under it by a gossip account read like a slap. Rejected Omega pregnant. Devereaux scandal? Jamie looked up. Drew was already moving toward him, palm lifted not to take his phone, but to offer his hand. We'll choose what this means, Drew said. The storm outside thickened against the window glass. Inside, the sea glass bowl caught the lamp and threw soft, stubborn color onto the wall. Jamie slid his phone across the counter, unclenched his fingers, and reached for Drew's hand instead. He felt the babies like the faintest echo under his palm, imagined maybe, but real enough in the story they were writing. He stepped into the circle Drew made not with an umbrella this time, but with his body and his promise. Okay, he said. His voice steadied as he said it again. Okay. Chapter 5. Claiming Our Own. The elevator whispered its ascent through the Devereaux corporate tower, each floor indicator a steady glow. Jamie stood beside Drew, palms pressed together in front of him as if at a seminar podium. The air smelled faintly of orchids and polished steel. He had dressed carefully, soft gray sweater under a blazer, his collar unbuttoned just enough to breathe. The babies inside him were still only a swell of possibility, but he felt their weight as if it were a compass inside his body. Drew's thumb brushed his shoulder, a small, deliberate contact. You sure? He murmured. Jamie nodded once. Yes. They'd been summoned with an email that pretended to be a meeting request, but read like a writ. Urgent. Family discussion. Boardroom 17A. In the attached PDF, a contract waited, words that might as well have been iron bars. Return to the family compound for legitimacy, medical oversight, press strategy. It had taken Jamie an hour to stop shaking enough to type his reply. We'll be there at 10. Now, in the mirrored doors, his own reflection looked almost calm. He thought of lectures he'd defended, of models he'd explained to skeptical professors. The boardroom would be no worse than a seminar, he told himself, only with sharper suits. The doors opened. Glass walls framed the boardroom like an aquarium. Outside, the city glittered morning bright. Inside, everything was chrome and white orchids curated into perfect silence. Vivienne sat at the head of the table, Laurent at her right. Ethan lounged 3 chairs down, tie loosened in performative nonchalance. A leather folio sat open before the family lawyer. Jamie, Vivienne said. The kind of greeting that was not one. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Jamie did, folding his hands on the table. Drew stood behind him for a beat, then took the seat at his left without waiting for permission. Laurent's smile was thin. We've prepared an arrangement to ensure everyone's well-being. Ethan's smirk flicked toward Jamie's midsection. And legitimacy. Jamie's hands went cold. He felt Drew's hand come to rest on his shoulder, light, offered. Jamie tipped his head, an almost imperceptible nod. The weight stayed, solid and anchoring. We're asking you to return to the estate for the duration, Vivienne continued. Full medical oversight, a controlled press environment. You'll have everything you need to finish your studies remotely. Jamie inhaled slowly, letting the breath settle. I have a doctor, he said. Dr. Ren Ito. I have classes that require physical attendance. And I have conditions. Vivienne's brows lifted. Conditions? Jamie's voice steadied, each point like an axiom on a chalkboard. Medical autonomy with Dr. Ren. Press boundaries. No forced residence. I finish my senior thesis uninterrupted. The board murmured, an unexpected ripple. Even the lawyer glanced up, pen stilled. Jamie kept his gaze level, as if walking them through an econometric model. Here's the data, here's the assumption, here's the conclusion. Vivienne's mouth pinched. You're being emotional. I'm being clear, Jamie said, and his tone was Professor Calm. If you want a statement from me, that's it. Drew shifted beside him. You heard him. Ethan barked a laugh. You think you're in control? You're just an Omega carrying Devereaux blood. Jamie turned to him, expression cool. I'm a person, carrying my children. Ethan's eyes flickered. Drew pushed his chair back and stood. The motion drew every gaze like a magnet. Enough. He unbuttoned his cuff with one hand, exposing the inner wrist. You want legitimacy? Here it is. His teeth pressed to his own skin, not Jamie's, and broke just enough to draw a bloom of cedar smoke scent. It rose warm and sharp into the chilled boardroom air. He smeared it across his own collar like paint. Cameras from the in-house PR team, summoned to document a family accord, clicked like rain on glass. Then Drew turned to Jamie. His voice dropped, low and steady, audible over a live mic. May I? Jamie's heart thundered. This was not a script they'd rehearsed. but he understood the question under it. I'll mark you only if you want it, and I'll do it here, before them all. Not as a contract, but as a choice. Yes, Jamie said, clear as a bell. Drew bent, slow and deliberate, and touched his mouth to the side of Jamie's neck where pulse beat. Not a bite, not a brand, just warmth and breath and the brief graze of teeth that left a visible bloom of color rising under Jamie's skin. Consent made visible. The camera's clicking became a weather of its own. Jamie's hands stayed folded on the table, but his spine straightened. He felt the mark like a promise. Ethan surged half out of his chair. You stole my Omega! Jamie turned his head, eyes steady on him. You threw me away. The room absorbed the truth, like a stone dropped into a pond, ripples of silence widening. Laurent's jaw worked. Vivienne's gaze skated to the lawyer, who was suddenly very interested in his notes. Drew remained standing, his hand lightly on Jamie's shoulder, scent still rising from his collar. You've had your say, he told the table. We've had ours. Going forward, you will respect Jamie's conditions, or you'll deal with legal consequences and a public story you can't control. Vivienne opened her mouth, then shut it. Ethan's fists clenched and unclenched. No one moved to stop them as Jamie and Drew left the table together. The atrium below was already teeming with press. Word had leaked, perhaps from the very people who had planned to control the narrative. Reporters surged behind velvet ropes. Flashes sparked like summer lightning. Drew stepped to the podium set up for quarterly announcements, Jamie beside him. He adjusted the mic with one hand, his other palm open between them, a silent offer. Jamie slid his fingers into it. The cameras snapped the gesture, like prey. No further comments on the pregnancy beyond health, Drew said into the microphones, voice firm but not cold. We're choosing privacy and joy. Jamie met the sea of faces without flinching. The heat of Drew's palm against his steadied his pulse. He nodded once, serene. Questions volleyed, but Drew had already guided them toward the exit. Security held back the crowd. They moved as one through the gauntlet of flashbulbs, heads high. Outside, the morning smelled like rain again. Back in the car, the city blurred past their windows in streaks of chrome and green. Drew exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time that day. Jamie turned toward him, their knees bumping. You marked yourself first, Jamie teased, voice still trembling but lighter. So you'd never doubt who I belong to, Drew said, and smiled, small and real, like a man seeing sunlight after a storm. Jamie laughed, leaning into him. Drew caught his chin gently and kissed him, slow, mouth warm, the kiss of a promise kept. The mark at Jamie's neck pulsed under Drew's thumb. Somewhere already, a headline was trending. Older Devereaux brother mates rejected Omega, twins on the way. Jamie closed his eyes and let Drew's forehead rest against his. Outside, the city roared. Inside, the car was quiet, cedar and pear scent curling together like two notes of the same chord. Chapter 6. New Heir, New Home. Sea wind breathed through the open windows of the cliff house, filling the kitchen with the scent of salt and pine. Sunlight spilled across the tile in pale gold, warming sticky notes that bloomed over the cabinets like a field of paper flowers. Citations, chapter headings, a running joke of doodled sea glass and umbrellas. Jamie sat at the farmhouse table, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard, his belly rounded in front of him, twins shifting with a soft ripple under his sweater. Each kick felt like a small punctuation mark inside him. His thesis document glowed on the screen. 30 pages of data and argument, graphs pasted in neat lines. The babies had taught him a new patience with his work. He wrote in bursts between naps, built his analysis like a nest. Across the kitchen, Drew crouched with a drill, fixing a low shelf into place so Jamie wouldn't have to reach for spices anymore. He wore an old t-shirt and paint-smeared sweatpants, hair curling from the sea air. When the shelf was secure, he tested it with a little shake, then straightened and came to stand behind Jamie's chair. "How's the chapter?" he asked, thumbs kneading slow circles into Jamie's lower back. "Stubborn," Jamie admitted, "but coming together." Drew bent and kissed the crown of his head between two citations, a gentle punctuation of his own. "So are we." Jamie's hands paused on the keyboard. He tilted his head back, catching Drew's eyes upside down. "I know." Drew smiled, smoothing a hand over Jamie's shoulder before returning to tidy the drill and screws. The domestic rhythm of it, the drill's hum, the keys click, the sea outside, wove around them like a new kind of silence. Later, they curled on the couch under a soft throw, Jamie's feet tucked against Drew's thigh. A baby-name book lay open between them, a scatter of bookmarks feathering its edges. They had read dozens, but two lingered. Ari, Jamie said aloud. Lion. Strength. Lun, Drew added. Grace. Jamie traced the words with a fingertip, strong and graceful. Like their father, Drew teased. Jamie rolled his eyes. Like their father and their other father. Drew's chuckle rumbled under Jamie's cheek. Co-parenting, he said. We should talk about the real stuff. Night feeds, who changes which diaper, who gets which shift. Jamie laughed. Divide and conquer? Divide and share, Drew corrected. We'll protect date nights like sacred liturgy, even if it's just you, me, and a sandwich on this couch. Jamie closed the book and rested his head on Drew's chest. We're going to be good at this. We already are. Drew kissed his temple. Jamie shifted carefully and climbed into Drew's lap, facing him. The movement was slow, deliberate, his belly pressed against Drew's sweater. Drew's hands came up automatically, not to pull, but to support, palms spanning his hips. Comfortable? Drew asked, voice low. Yeah. Jamie's breath came out a little unsteady. Just stay like this. Drew nodded. His fingers traced light paths over the fabric of Jamie's sweater, up his back, no higher than Jamie guided. Jamie's hands slipped behind Drew's neck, thumbs rubbing small circles into the nape. They kissed, at first just brushing mouths, then deeper. Breathy laughter spilled between them when one of the twins kicked hard enough to bump Drew's stomach. Guess someone wants in on this, Drew murmured. Jamie smiled against his mouth. They'll have to wait their turn. The kiss deepened again, still slow, still careful. Jamie guided the pace, Drew followed. The narrative of it stayed on faces and fingers. Laced hands, nods, the soft press of foreheads. Ask, nod, kiss, breathe. Drew's eyes stayed open between kisses, watching for any flicker of discomfort. Jamie exhaled a tremor and pressed his forehead to Drew's. I'm okay, he whispered. I know. Drew's thumb swept his cheekbone. I love you. Jamie's answering kiss was tender and sure. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Drew shifted Jamie gently off his lap, helped him settle against the cushions, and went to answer. A courier stood on the porch, wind tugging at his cap, a heavy envelope in hand. From Mrs. Devereaux, he said, then disappeared down the path. Drew closed the door and broke the seal with his thumb. Inside, a single sheet of thick cream paper bore Vivienne's precise hand. Recognition of Drew and Jamie's union, recognition of the twins' legitimacy without conditions, a small, formal signature where there had only ever been resistance. Jamie looked up from the couch. What is it? Drew handed it over. An end to the fight, at least on paper. Jamie read it, eyebrows rising. Then he shrugged lightly and set it on the coffee table. Our family was real before their ink. Drew smiled and slid the letter into a leather folder on the shelf, archiving it like a trophy. Still nice to have a relic. Jamie reached for his hand. Relics belong in museums, we're here. Just before dawn, they stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean stretched below, a slow pulse against the cliffs. Pastel light spilled across Jamie's rounded belly, making the curve glow like a pearl cupped in dawn. Drew stood behind him, arms around his waist, palms spanning the movement beneath his sweater. Two small kicks tapped his hand and stilled. Jamie covered Drew's fingers with his own. They're awake. They know you're here. Drew bent and kissed his temple. Chosen. Every day. He said, the vow he had made at the boardroom, now repeated to the sea. Jamie leaned back against him, eyes closing. Every day. Beside the balcony door, the old black umbrella leaned against the wall, its cloth folded, no longer needed. The storm had passed. The house smelled of salt and tea. Inside, the kitchen waited with sticky notes and a low shelf within reach, a thesis open on the table, a future ready to be written. Jamie smiled at the horizon, Drew's palm warm over his heart and over the two lives beneath it. Home, found.